Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Okay,
good.
that's-
Okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
all right. So are we ready to begin? It's not quite 9 yet.
Let's go ahead and wait. Let's go ahead and wait 2 minutes.
Okay. So what do you guys see on the screen?
We see your slide 1.
Okay, do you see, how many boxes do you see?
Hold on.
4 boxes.
4
I see
boxes.
4 boxes.
Okay, so I need to configure it so you guys see the animation here. Let's see.
You're showing the PowerPoint slide itself, and not necessarily. Yeah, you're not showing the slideshow per se.
Yeah, let's see.
If you just do the slideshow from the beginning, or
Yeah, I did, but it's showing in another screen. So let's see if this is it. I don't know where I can show it on this screen here. No? Should be here. From the beginning. Monitor, okay. Primary monitor. Okay, let's try again now. All right, do you see 2 boxes?
I see
Yeah.
two boxes.
Okay, all right, cool. That's what I wanted.
Okay, very good.
Okay, so
Now
do
you're
we
back.
want a few,
Now you're back
do
to
we
the
want a
PowerPoint.
couple more minutes?
Okay, very good. You may begin at your convenience. It's 9 o'clock.
Okay. So 9 a.m. right now. All right, so let's see who we have online here. I see Bruce, Gary, Larry. Trying to read here. Pierre, Reg. Did I pronounce that correctly? Did I botch anybody's name so far?
Nope. It's good.
No?
That's
Okay.
good.
All right. So what I'd like to do today is why don't we, since we don't have a lot of people online, why don't we introduce ourselves? Maybe some of you know each other, but I don't really. So maybe we could say our names. What is it that we do? Our title, I guess, and where we are in the United States. So I can kick it off. My name is Fanny Carvalho. I will facilitate our discussion today. I'm in Houston, Texas, and I'm a change management consultant. All right. So let's see, Gary, would you like to?
Sure. Okay, I'm actually based in Vancouver, Canada. I call myself actually a complexity facilitator. So I kind of work within the complexity side, and I will be on next week to explain more about that. And that I joined the Change Management Network, I think at the beginning of this year.
All right. So let's see, Reg. Reg, would you like Reg? I think it's Reg. Am I pronouncing that correct? I think you're on mute. Okay, there you are.
Yeah, sure. So it's good afternoon here in Vienna, in Austria, and I guess you guys have just got up, and I'm looking forward to afternoon tea in the good old English style in Austria. What do? I teach at 2 universities, and I help organizations, international organizations around the world, review how they work and focus on getting the best for their organization and their people. And so that's why your discussion today is very interesting. Some call me a change consultant, some say I'm an OD practitioner, and others say that I'm a change management person. I see I'm all 3, and part of that is also being a futurist.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Let's see, Tali.
Hi, this is, my name coming up on the WebEx is coming out as Tolly because of the computer, but I am Asha Purna Doctor and I'm from Toronto, Canada. I am a project manager specializing in capability development projects, whether it is process improvement or learning and development. So very happy to be here on this forum and great to meet such big practitioners because that's where my learning is right now as learning to perform as a change manager more deeply. I do have the ADCAR certification and all, but no practice. So very, very delighted to be here. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Pierre? Yeah, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, I just got an email from Pierre, says that he can hear you all, but he doesn't have video, so he should be able to talk to us.
Okay, that's all right. So let's go with Larry.
Hi, I'm from Singapore, so it's 10 p.m. now. Night is still young. I'm a novice here, so I'm totally new to this, to change management. I was a B2B marketer for, my background is in marketing, and I think trying to transition into the area of innovation and growth consulting, and really I'm interested in the human side of what does it take to actually make change sustainable, because if we're talking about changes in business models, then there'll be a lot of things that needs to change within the organization and the structure. And then I'm just really starting on this journey, and that's why I'm here.
All right. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. Gary,
Oh, I've already been talking.
you've gone. Sorry,
You got
I'm
me.
repeating people. Bruce.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. My name is Bruce George. I'm from Saratoga Springs, New York, and I have been doing change management for a long time, but I'm just beginning to work directly with project managers. I have a heavy background in project management as well, and I'm targeting those organizations that they don't really have the budget or the resources to have dedicated change management people, but to help the project managers understand some of the basic principles. So they'll be able to get better results and more sustainable change on the projects they're working on.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name here. It's such a pretty name. Elk? I'm sorry. Did I botch your name? You are mute.
Sorry, I've unmuted myself. Hi, sorry, no, my name is Elkie.
Okay. Okay.
I'm based in the UK, and I'm a change manager. 25 years experience working in change management.
Perfect. Wonderful. All right. So let's see. Dr. Ross.
Say that again.
Dr. Ross? Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ross.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, okay. Dr. Ross?
Okay, this is Ross. I'm the ringmaster of the circus. I'm semi-retired, do a little bit of online teaching, online course development, and travel when I can.
All right. Well, thank you so much. There's someone else here that's just showing up as an admin. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, good morning. I'm Dolores Prignitz, and I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I met Dr. Worth when he presented to our project management world a few years ago with Jackie Hood. And so I kind of come in and out of your conversations online. And I'm a change manager that's been working in high-tech consumer product as well as nonprofit. So I'm ADCAR certified, and I guess I'm a change manager or OD consultant, but glad to be here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Did I leave anyone out?
I haven't said hello yet. My name's Arlene Bond.
Sorry, Arlene, I didn't see you here. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I came in late, so I apologize for that. But I am a change management consultant. I've been doing it for about 25 years. And most of the work I do now is with government clients, so the United States government in different locations. And it is really, as I guess I talk about myself as more of a practitioner, trying to understand how to help people adapt to whatever it is they're trying to do differently.
All right, well, thank you. Anyone else? Everybody been introduced? All right, someone's recording the meeting. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. Okay, so today, what I would like to do with you guys is really bring this discussion to light. What is the difference between a business consultant or a management consultant? Let's use both of those as synonyms for today. The difference between that kind of consultant and a change management consultant. Is there a difference? How does the market perceive us? Is this how it should be? Are we where we want to be in terms of how these two types of consultants act? So what I'm going to do is, what I've planned for today is I'll briefly introduce some ideas. You guys have received the invitation, and this PowerPoint that I'm going to show you, this one slide, was already there. So you guys have seen this before. I'm just going to comment on it a little bit and then open for discussion. That would be the first half of our conversation. And then in the second half, I would like to present a practical problem for us. And then we can try to place different personas in different places. And that would be the second half. So let's see how it goes and play it by ear. All right, are there any questions before we start?
Hi guys, it's Pierre. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hey, well done. Got there in the end.
Oh, hello. Hey, Pierre. Okay, we can see you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Pierre Montesino. I'm in sunny London at the moment. I'm a program director who works in transformation and change management. That's it.
Wait, it's sunny in London?
Nope. In a sense, yeah, it's sunny. There is a little bit of sunshine out there, but yeah, we had some wonderful sunshine last week, so I'm not going to complain too much.
Wow, so you've had your 5 minutes of summer, right?
Absolutely, no more than that.
I have friends who live in the UK, and they're always talking about how much it rains.
Yeah, it's a myth that we have the sunshine here, but it does happen once in a while.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Pierre. I'm glad you were able to connect with us. Thank you. All right, so let's get the ball rolling here. So like I said, we have these, I would like to talk about these two different kinds of consultants. So if we look at the business consultant or management consultant, let me click here. Okay, so a business consultant really works with trying to improve different things in a company or in any kind of enterprise. And these are a few examples, just off the top of my head, of things that a business consultant can do. Work with process improvement, cost cutting, performance improvement, methodology shift, redefine the business model, company reorg. I'm sure you guys can think of 10 other things. But of course, a business consultant is bringing change. That's what we do. We're trying to improve things as business consultants. So usually a business consultant, at least in my experience, is part of the strategic decision making. They are giving advice. They are bringing in their expertise to try to make things better. And they're usually working with upper level of management in an enterprise. Now, the change management consultant, I was furloughed from my consulting company, from the consulting company I had been working with. And so I'm now transitioning, getting into a new company. But over the past couple of weeks, I've been looking at a lot of job boards and different job descriptions. And so change management consultants, here is what I've found. They are expecting someone who can make a change management plan, who can do stakeholder analysis, communication plan, training plan, assessment, sponsor management, all those things that we see when we do, for example, our EPCAR certification. And what I found is they're expecting the change management consultant to be more of an executioner rather than a strategic thinker. Usually the C-suite, they have already made their decisions saying, okay, this is the change that's going to happen by this date. Please help us make it happen. And so the change management consultant would be attached at the hip with the project manager, usually executing things. Nothing wrong with that. My question is this your experience first? Is this what you're seeing out there? And second, is this really what we want? As change management consultants, do we not want to be a part of the decision making here, saying, okay, so you're going to make this change. Is this your plan? Do we not want to be a part? Do we not want to give ideas and recommendations when the decisions are being made here? Is our role really just that of an institution? So that's my question to you guys. What's your experience, and do you think this is where we should be? So, any thoughts?
I do have some. I wasn't trying to go first, so but I have a couple of thoughts as far as this goes. When I got involved in kind of the area, the consulting world, let's say from that perspective, I came from IBM. In IBM, the whole purpose of change, IBM was kind of, I don't know how to describe this exactly. They led in technology in all respects at that time in the world, like in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. They were the leaders in technology. Most environments had no idea how to use the technology they were creating. So they had people like me who would help user communities adapt the organization to effectively using technology. Okay, so I came from that world and went into Coopers & Lybrand as a consultant. Why? Because Coopers & Lybrand initially was an accounting firm, okay, which most consultants were at that time. They were accounting firms. They did all the business practice, all this stuff that you've listed as far as the business management thing goes, mostly around finance. But they did not have the skills of adapting user communities to change, which was why they hired me. Coopers & Lybrand then transformed to PricewaterhouseCoopers, which then became the consulting firm, and I was involved with them when Agile was actually created. And the reason Agile originally was created was because the business management piece of consulting was largely still focused on the accounting financial side, and it was very difficult for them to relate outside of the C group to the rest of the workforce. So the change management activities were helping to create this kind of adaptation based on an understanding of where the organization wanted to go. So my initial experience was that. Tools and everything came out throughout this thing. I mean, I've been involved with organizations through every kind of assessment development tool that has ever been used for that kind of purpose. And it was all around trying to understand how to make the business better. It was also the transition from organizations that were hierarchically structured into more matrix structured organizations. So how do we transition from this structure to this other structure and still be effective and still produce our results? All of these kind of things created tons of products, and then people went to college and created all of these different methodologies. But the bottom line was, this was the reason we were doing any of it. And all of the tools came as a result of, well, this worked here, so let's brand that. Well, that worked, so let's brand that. But people kind of forgot, why were we doing it in the first place? And the real reason is because organizations, one, are always trying to improve. Saving money means sometimes that you stop doing certain things and do other things better. You know, all of these different reasons that people would hire consultants to help them do things while they continued to do their real work. So, okay, that's my perspective on the difference. So there really isn't a difference, but because products were created by consulting firms to sell, there are separate deliverables. Okay, but the work is all the same, but the deliverables can be very different depending on who's your customer and what they want.
So what you're saying, Arlene, see if I understand it correctly, that you work both up here and down here, is that right?
Yeah.
Depending on the client.
Yeah. Well, and see, part of it comes because my initial experience, of course, was always in the C group. Okay, when I was working with IBM, we would start by doing strategic planning with the C group. Okay, what are you going to do the next 5 years? You want to advance your technology in this way. What are the things you'd like to be doing? And then we would show you how things can be done with the technology. Okay, so I had to start at that level. But then when you want to actually use technology, you have to work with the workers. How is work being done? And they have to be taught how to use technology to advance the work they already do. So for my world, that's kind of how that worked out.
All right, well, thank you. Any other perspectives?
My experience was similar to Arlene, because I was with Ernst & Young Consulting, and later, which is now Capgemini. So you do start at the C-suite, because that's typically where they want to go. But in my own practice here, I found out that I'm actually probably in between, not strategic as much as more operational. Because what I found when you work in the C-suite, they like what you want to do, but they don't have any money. You always got to say to her, well, that's great, Gary, but take it down to one of the division managers, regional managers. They have the budget for it. So knowing that, I quickly cut to the chase and went straight to find out where the money was. And typically it was at operations level, and they've got a problem. So, and when you deal with the operations end, it's all about the why, the what, and the how, particularly the how, which is the execution part here. So I found myself getting involved kind of trying to answer all three questions.
All right, so here's a question for you guys. Do you think that a business consultant works both as in the strategic level and at the execution? Is that your experience as well?
Yep, that's mine.
That's yours.
I echo that as well. It depends very much on who you're working with and their perceptions of what they want to do. Clearly,
Exactly.
if you're going in as a consultant and or a third party, and you're looking at working with the C-suite, they want obviously they want deliverables for the money they're actually paying you. So there's an expectation that you will drive, and it's been known to me or been pushed down to me several times that I can work at the strategic level, but I'm also being pushed down to the execution level to make that happen and make the drive through as well. So yes, I agree.
All right, so we're talking about here that business consultants can work in both levels. Anybody work just at the, has anybody been hired to work just at the execution level? The decision has been made and we would like to execute it.
Fanny, if I can just answer your first question, from my experience, there are a large number of business or management consultants who come up with wonderful plans and have not a clue about the execution. So I don't think it's a truism that business or management consultants can actually undertake change. I think that's a very individual thing. And I can give you major organizations who are well known for being unable to make that transition from grand plans to true execution and sustainability. And so I don't think it's that simple. I also think that the line you have here, the strategic decision making, I think is very similar to the sales business, where we used to call it a waterline, where the companies make all their decisions above the waterline, below the waterline. It's the reverse here, and then pop their heads up and look for somebody to do the delivery on the sales side for their request for a quotation or whatever system they use. And I think it's very similar in terms of the C-suite often come up with a problem or a grand idea, and they're going hunting for somebody who can make sense with them of that problem or idea. And very often that means management consultants, and very seldom change management specialists. And historically, I think there's a gap here between the two, and I think that's OD. Organizational development's been around a lot longer than change management, I would suggest, and goes back, in my knowledge and studies, to well below the late 30s, early 40s, long before management consultancy became a fad and change management became what it is today. And so I don't think it's as simple as can one do the other. I think it's very much, does one want to do the other? And what are the skills and what are the skills and competencies required? Are they the same? And I would argue they're very different.
All right, so what do you think, what kind of competencies would you say are involved with each of these two stages?
I would have to say, I mean, Reg, I agree with a lot of what you said, but I don't think any of these things are really different from each other. It really depends on the problem you're trying to solve. My experience has been, I've been in every situation, or a lot of situations, maybe not every, but a lot. And it just depends on where you come into the project. Okay, if you're coming into a project where there is an existing project manager, they're trying to reorganize an area of the organization, or they're installing new software, or there's something like that going on that creates a project situation, then I'm coming in to do a role that they call change management. Okay, and that role is all the things that you've listed in the change management area. Okay, because that's the expectation. And all of it depends. I mean, my area, and this is my experience, is I work with a lot of small organizations who don't have change management skills necessarily, but they may have the project, or they may have some part of it where they need that skill. So I come in to do that. But it really is, what is the customer's expectation? What kind of deliverables are they expecting? And then how does the team expect you to participate as far as the change management piece is concerned? Now, when I get to go in on my own, and my customer starts at the decision-making level. Now, the solution decision-making comes from below the strategic group, but the cost, or the people that are going to spend the money on the project and actually put resources behind it are in the C group.
So, Ali, if I can suggest that you came in to the change situation from the top level, from the business management consultancy. So you had a good understanding of business and all the associations of business, and then developed further and brought the change into it. And that's your history. But my argument is that a very large number of people come directly now into change management by doing a course and so forth, who have no experience or very limited experience of how businesses really run. And this is why I don't think it's one or the other can do both. I think that it depends on the individual, their history, background, and their competencies. How can you do a stakeholder analysis if you don't understand how a business works how the circular economy is impacting on business and so I don't think it's an either or. I think that you have to need and understand both, but most, in my experience, don't.
All right. So, Reg, you're saying that it really depends. Some individuals can do both. Some can do just one or the other, depending on their history and their skills. Is that right?
Yeah, I can give you a real live example now. I was approached by an organization recently. It's got a workforce of 310,000 and a turnover of 211 billion a year. And I was asked to do some development of their engineering side because the engineers aren't managers. From that conversation, it's now led to a complete review of how they're operating and all the changes associated with it because they were chasing symptoms. So I'm not going to them in the initial as a business consultant. I was asked initially to develop a training program. And so this is why I don't think you can separate it. There was no way that I, as a professional, would even think about a training program given the situation they discussed. So we had another conversation. This is why I think this separation is quite artificial.
So you were asked to do the training program. Was that something you were doing? Did you also work with, were you part of strategic decision making, or you just executed the training program? Is that what
I haven't done it. As I said, I was very recommended from past experience of another company, another international company, to help their engineers become managers. Basically, they saw that as their problem. But the conversation with the client changed it totally because of understanding the way business is run, and this was clearly a symptom of something far deeper. And so all I'm saying is if you go in as a change person or a leadership development person or whatever, I think these are all artificial segmentation of what is necessary for an organization. And so this separation of management consultant and change consultant, in my world, they should be combined and you should have the skill set for it. Unfortunately, most accreditation processes do not give the management consultant side. They focus purely on the change consultant. And I'm not necessarily saying they're wrong. All I'm saying is it's not helpful for the industry or the business. And so this artificial separation, I think it's artificial.
Right. So you're saying in an ideal world, it should be one thing, and people, the consultants, should be able to play in both worlds. And this separation should even exist, right? Did I capture that?
Yeah, but and I would take it one step further. People will talk about OD as a separate thing. I will argue that I don't know of any successful change management person who doesn't use OD processes as part of their process. And again, it's another artificial separation. It's about the appropriate skills for the situation pertaining at the time.
Right. So now we're talking about where we should be, right? You're telling us that this separation should not exist, right? It's artificial, it should not exist.
But I don't think it does exist for effective consultants. It's not whether it should or not. I think it does exist for those who want to focus on one part, but for successful consultants, and I've run my business for the last 30 years, it's very successful, then they should not separate them.
Well, here's my view. I think what's happened, and it really probably started back in the 80s when things like business process reengineering came along. And at that time, the approach was to do reductionism. So essentially, we took the whole and we split it into parts. We did process, technology, and we did people here. And at that time, I was at Ernst & Young Consulting here, and we were hived off into different sort of practices. So I became part of the change management practice there because I was part of people. The process people kind of went their way, and the technology people who did all the ERP stuff, they went that way too. And the thing that what kind of like solidified is that each of these parts got certification as well. You just look at the change management practice we're right now, how many different types of certifications that you can get. Just crazy. I'm with Reg, is that these things are kind of artificial and it's caused us a lot of problems because it's very mechanistic as an approach. The idea is that if we take things apart, we should be able to put them back together again and it should work. And we found many times it just doesn't work. So my question is, why even split it at the beginning? Why don't you keep it holistically? And I think, Reg, if I'm right, that's what you're saying here as a consultant. You've got to be able to be in all the camps here because you've got to see all the interactions and the relationships that are going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just my final comment on this, because I don't want to hog the time. At university now for IT technology master's courses, at least 50% of the course now is management and how organizations run, because technology is not separate. It's no longer a support function. It is an integral part of the business, if not the business. And I think education fell into this segmentation approach. They fell into that trap. And I think the same trap is here.
All right. All right. Let's hear from others. Bruce, Elke, would you like to chime in? And it's okay if you would not.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that since becoming an independent change manager, I come into programs or projects when they have made a decision. So I come specifically to fulfill the role of the change manager. So I don't necessarily get involved with the C-suite in the or around the concepts that you're talking about now. However, I do get involved in terms of sponsorship around the program and making sure that whoever is sponsoring is actually actively participating in it, not just delegating it.
So, Elke, let me see if I understand it correctly. You're saying that you come in more of a change in this role of the execution role, but helping those who sponsor the project make sure they're visible. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Anyone else like to chime in? We have Larry, we have Pierre, Bruce.
One question here. Does the size of the consulting organization play a part here also? And how they choose to specialize or generalize?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it does. If you come from a big consulting firm, they actually have what they call as client service teams. And on those teams, I was kind of like the consulting rep, but you also have the finance, audit, you'd have all the special services. And we would meet kind of like a regular basis here, just to try to find out where are the needs that we need to service different clients here. And essentially in the consulting side, I was the how component. It was the auditors and everybody else here. They were more the strategic component.
The reason I bring that up is I worked as an inside consultant running a number of projects, and in that role we would sometimes bring in very specialized organizations, often smaller organizations, but at the same time I worked with very large consulting organizations. I think Gary had mentioned Capgemini, which was one of the organizations that I had worked closely with. Very, very big, but also I was basically working to get it done on the inside. I knew the inside people, and for the large part, what was interesting is that the organization would use this opportunity to really do what they could not have otherwise have done. So by the internal people jumping on board in the way that they did, they were actually able to steer the external Capgemini, in this case consultant, to do what the organization has wanted to do, but mainly because they had either a direct line to the C-suite or in a couple cases, a direct line to the parent organization that otherwise would not have been there. So it was a different use of the consulting firm in that way.
Mhm.
All right. Any other thoughts?
I just want to comment on this big versus large. The large companies, and I started off as an internal consultant and was very often interviewing other companies that were coming in to do some work. And the business model of the large companies is totally different to the small companies, I find. And one of the main tasks when we were interviewing external consultancies was to remove the gold watches and the flashy suits who were up front saying how brilliant they were, to find out who the undergraduates and recent postgraduates that were going to do the work without the experience, and who was going to pull it all together. And this is why, for me, I come back to what I said earlier, that this segmentation of functions and responsibilities is not always good. And there are very few people who are able to look at things holistically and pull them together. And certainly that's one of the big issues of the big organizations that I found at that time.
So I'd like to chime in here. I think that in larger organizations, the roles do tend to be more split. I think I've seen a lot of the execution side here. It is artificial, I completely agree. However, people do want to hire change management consultants as executioners. And they do tend to hire consultants, whether they call it change management or not, to do the strategizing. Sometimes this consultant I've seen, they do the strategizing, they go on to execute it. But I think in larger companies, they tend to split it a bit more. And in smaller companies, it's more of a one person who does all. What do you guys think?
I think you're right about that. That's been my experience. I work a lot with smaller companies, but I came from very large companies. And what I saw evolve in the consulting companies, like I said, I worked for Coopers and Lybrand and then PricewaterhouseCoopers, was the definition of product. Okay, it was based on deliverables and who they were marketing to. Okay, so large business plans, the higher level overall organizational deliverable of the structure of the organization, the larger view of the stakeholder communities, all of those things were of interest to the C group area. Below that was how you gained that information. So you'd have to have a relationship there, but it was never, those were never tools that were used tactically. You couldn't execute anything from that. It was just nice to know. What became the executable was when you worked with the work, the actual workers who were creating the product or the result that the organization was there for, that could tell you what really needed to be done and how well they already did it. So that was the information in my perspective. When I had the opportunity to be the consultant that was in the lead, my goal would always be to try to bring together the C group and the workers so that leadership would be confident that they were literally focused on real problems and that there were viable solutions that they could support and that they could get other support for if they were to accomplish them. So that relationship was always the most important thing. But when you come into these projects, depending on where you come in at and what people really want from you, you can do any one of these little segmented things because that's the way they sell consulting. They sell it as individual activities. So, you know, I would come into an environment like I've worked with Deloitte. I've worked with well, a lot of the large consulting firms. And when you come into a large consulting firm like that, and I've worked as an employee or as a, a project person, and you come in because they want you to create the deliverable specifically, and that's what you go do. But you're not the one who's created the strategy. You haven't made any final decisions or anything in that way. You can, if based on what you find out from the deliverable you're creating, you might influence a final decision or something that happens because you can give them new information. But literally somebody else is leading. So it just really depends on who's leading and also where you come into the project at.
All right. So do you guys think that currently in the market, most people are more of holistic practitioners and they can do both, like Arlene is mentioning here, depending on what the client wants? Or do you think people today are more specialized, only able to do one or the other? What do you guys, what's your view?
Well, I'll say a few things. There's a couple of terms that we use. One is called the whole 9 yards, which is kind of like the holistic side. And the other term is called bolt-on. And if you're a bolt-on practitioner, you come in and you are specialized and you do a certain part. You're not integrated because you're just brought in here. A lot of consulting firms are like that now because they have to outsource. They cannot afford to have the whole 9 yards. So they have specialized firms which they can bolt on depending on wherever the client is here. When I was with Ernst & Young, which later became Capgemini, I noticed a tremendous change. And the change was that I was doing the whole 9 yards because while you're in there executing and implementing, you'd also discover all these unarticulated needs that the client had. You'd do a proposal, get it signed, and you'd stay engaged with the client. And that just worked out well. But when Capgemini was kind of formed, particularly led by the US practitioners, they brought in what we call the EDS model. And maybe Arlene, you know about that, where the model was, okay, you're going to either sell or else you're going to implement here. And I was split. I had to make the decision whether I was going to implement or else be a marketer and seller.
Right.
And I realized here that I could not do the whole 9 yards. But worst part about it, as an executioner, I would have to execute whatever that marketer sold. And quite often it was a bunch of garbage. Yeah. And I was stuck with that here. I'm going, yes. Holy crap, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, I've been a few of those.
So I went on my own, which I've
Me too.
Because I can do the whole 9 yards. So
exactly. Yeah, that was true. They would plug you in to accomplish a specific thing. Whether that would be helpful to the project or not, or whether the client would actually succeed at something or be even happy with their total result, they would still want you to create whatever that deliverable was. So, yeah, I got out of that myself, and honestly, and that it's much more rewarding to work directly and to be, the whole 9 yards, because you really can help a client figure out a real problem and solve it.
Yeah, the big key too, and for people starting up like Larry in Singapore, if you can do it, don't do RFPs, request for proposals. Waste of time. You want to be in there the whole 9 yards because you have a chance to talk to the client, iterate your proposal, fine tune it, so you can really hit it right on the sweet spot. In an RFP here, you're rolling the dice. You never know if you're going to get there or not here. And as if you're a small practitioner here, you can't afford to have that non-billable time to keep your own business running.
Agreed totally. This is why I said it's an artificial divide, and it's a business model divide. And if it works for some people and some organizations, there's no problem. But I really do believe it's an artificial business model divide.
So, Reg, do you think it would be, what do you think is the more natural construct for people to be more holistic practitioners? Is that what you propose? Interesting.
I think that's a natural progression. Even if people come in, young people come into change management and they get accreditation or they go on a course or whatever, and they start to learn their business. If they're any good, they find out quite soon enough that actually what they're doing is playing with symptoms in many cases, and they start to get frustrated. And they start to question why they're doing certain things. Now, if they're working with another organization and through a project manager, that could cause some conflicts because project managers don't want to hear that because they're usually stuck in the good old iron triangle: on time, on price, and so far the deliverable. It's not necessarily about what is needed and appropriate. It's what the project has described, and that's their job. And so they get frustrated, and they learn more and more as they go through the process of how businesses really work. And when you go on an MBA and everybody's treated like robots, it's not how businesses really work, but it's an important part of understanding the different disciplines within an organization and so forth. And so you slowly develop, in my experience, into this more holistic person. And then you get even more frustrated because they're not robots, they are people, and we know what's going on in the US at the moment when we start segregating people into different things and not taking them as people. And so you start to think about psychology and you start to study that. And you get even more holistic. And Arlene and Gary, their stories are very similar. It's born out of gaining these experiences and now very professional at what they do. And so, as I said, it's okay to be a changed person if that's what you want to do and you're comfortable there. I just find that for customers, the holistic approach is more beneficial for them because you start to challenge the C-suite assumptions. And with technology today, and I come back to this education side, it's important because C-suite don't understand the technology, so they need someone to help them understand how to use technology for success. And those people also have to understand how the business works and how you bring about that success. And so it's getting even more holistic than it's ever been before. And this segmentation it's not sustainable. But there's a personal view.
Yeah, I agree with it.
I agree, especially that it can be very frustrating if you have years of experience and you can do the holistic approach and you come in here and you into an executioner and you aren't part of the decision making and you're left with executing something that may or may not be the best choice for the institution. Again, you come in here and that's your job. It can be very frustrating.
It does kind of lead to that conversation about should you be a generalist or should you be a specialist sort of thing here? And I've kind of like always fought with that and wondered what's the best thing to do. So the term that I was given was like, oh, you want to be a cluster specialist. What the hell is that? Well, a cluster specialist is somebody that kind of has a kind of a nice horizontal look, a bit of everything going across the whole thing holistically, but you can go deep dive into specialty. So I think there's room for that. If you want to do a deep dive into change management, go ahead, or IT, or else process, have that, but also have that broad understanding of what's happening in the whole organization. So again, that term cluster specialist has always kind of stuck with me.
All right. Any other thoughts? So let's hear from someone who hasn't, if they want to participate. Pierre, you name a few names here. Larry, Bruce, would you like to, any of you like to chime in? Dolores? Oh, well, that's all right. No problem at all. Democracy here. People chime in as they want, no problem at all. All right, so do we have any other thoughts on the strategic versus the execution, where change managers lie versus business consultants? All right, I think we've covered a lot of things. So I did jot down a few ideas here that we collectively put together. I can share it with you guys later. But why don't we try to do an exercise? See what you guys think. If you guys don't think that's a good idea, we don't have to do this. I just wanted to liven it up a little bit. So, of course, anywhere you turn, everybody's talking about COVID-19. And to say it has changed a lot of the world is an understatement. So we're suddenly hit with this amazing amount of change in our everyday lives, organizations, everything change and all of that. So if you were to play God here and we were to design how this change was going to happen, what roles would you put in there? So for example, in the strategic decision making, if we are going to divide it into strategic and execution, we do have the executive branch of government on all levels, on the federal level, on the state level, local level. They're there making decisions, right? So who would you, let's play God here, who would you like to have them? Let me change my screen here just for a minute so that we can play here. So what would you say? I put here a few roles. Let me just move my screen here one moment. So I put in community leaders, healthcare consultants, and other people. What would you say? My idea was to say, okay, so let's have community leaders play here. Let's have them play here. Others that you may think should be involved in making these decisions. What I see here, the reason I came up with this is that I see, for example, that states are beginning to open up. I'm in Texas. We're all in for business. And some of the behaviors that are still desirable as we open up, for example, wearing a mask, people and social distancing, people may or may not, this may or may not be reinforceable or sustainable. So was this change really well planned? Should we have done it in a different way? So what are the players that should have been here and weren't, for example? Anybody like to take a guess at this? Do you guys think this is a good idea, a good game to play in the first place? Let's ask that question.
Yeah.
And it's okay if it's not.
Yeah, okay. So I'm coming from a different area, Bonnie, which I will explain next week here, where I think we need to engage anybody that wants to be engaged, particularly when we try to create or shape what we call the next normalcy. So why do I want to kind of include or exclude? And there could be people there that you're showing that we may not even know about here that could be major players in this kind of like game.
So you're saying we should open it up to anyone who wants to
Yeah,
engage.
and that's and I'll show how we can do that next week.
Okay, good. It's taking us to next week's topic. How do we engage people to participate, right?
Correct. Yeah, correct.
All right.
I think what's missing here for me is the contextual environment. Yeah, we've got the pandemic. The American system politically and virtually every other way is totally different to Europe. And even within Europe, you've got totally different legal and political systems. And anything to do with COVID is not going to happen in a vacuum. And so I think looking internal to an organization first is not my particular approach, because I need to understand the overall environment of what this organization is within. And that is also at many different levels. And so I agree with Gary There are many players here that just, they're not there. But in particular, the leadership for the country in which it's in is a critical part of any strategic decision making at any organisation.
So instead of executive branch of government, you're saying leadership, government leadership.
No,
No?
you can call it what you like. It will be different in different countries for different legal reasons.
Agreed. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't judge what's actually happening in the UK and compare it to say how things are happening in the US, and the impact of how each organization, each government is dealing with it. Like Reg says, is just too difficult to try and understand, because particularly with the unknowns that we don't know about, the unknown unknowns, if you know what I mean.
All right. So
And unfortunately, the press are trying to make these comparisons, and that muddies the water and makes it more difficult for the leadership.
all right. Using the reality that each of us is in different countries, that's all right. How would you, what kind of players do you think for your particular reality that should have been more engaged and that maybe weren't in your particular country?
I mean, I can only comment as an outsider, but who used to actually work for 30 odd years with government in the UK. So I know how that government works from an establishment level, but in terms of leadership, they're all very different. If you look at Trump, who says lots and lots of things, but do they really, are they really what he means and believes? Whereas in a more introverted psychological person might go around and take in lots of information and then come out with very few pronouncements. And so you have this extrovert, introvert psychological approach on a leadership level without even knowing what other people they have consulted from the introvert side, and the extrovert testing the water to see how people react. And so this is why I think identifying people as individuals in these circumstances or any circumstances is not my preferred approach. I like what Gary is saying, and next week I think will help us to make sense of that in more detail. I think it's far more complex. And this comes back to my original comment earlier today. By breaking it up into this strategic level and doing level, this doesn't work because they aren't broken up in reality. It's a very complex, integrated situation, and we have to view it in all those different directions, I would suggest.
Any other thoughts? Is someone, I can't hear you. Is someone saying something? It seems. Someone made me try to say something. I cannot hear you.
It could be
none of us can hear.
No, it could be background noise. I don't know.
As a serving officer.
Well, all right. Are there any other thoughts on the issue?
He is now apologizing for something there.
Oh, well, I'm gonna hand it back to you, Ross. Ross? You're on mute. Ross, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. I get excited and get going. Okay. Thank you very much. That was a very interesting conversation because I often don't think about it, and that's what we're trying to get. I just had a message that Gary has left. He had another activity to get to, but he's already promised some additional information for next week on the Kuneven model. And I'm particularly looking forward to that because I saw some early versions of that model, but Gary has gone further with David Snowden on some of the cognitive edge work. So I'm looking forward to that next week. While we still have a few people here, are there any other general comments that you would like to put on the table for discussion?
I just make one. Am I on LinkedIn? Yeah. I'll just make one comment. When that diagram was up with the change management side, and there was this stakeholder aspect, which we touched on, and it looks as if I collapsed, unfortunately, with my comment about the leadership or executive side in the pandemic. And I would be really interested in other people's views on what do we really mean by stakeholders today? The old traditional approach of who knows who is going to be impacted by or who will impact on the change. Is that still valid today, or do we have to look at it differently, given that we're a global world, nothing is acting just locally anymore, or very little. So do we have to start looking at this differently? Or was my comment earlier about looking at the bigger picture and so forth not appropriate?
I was thinking that stakeholders was very broad and big and not restricted by boundaries. So I don't know if I need to make that distinction because I see it as so broad as anybody who could be in any way directly or even indirectly touched by the change.
And yet, certainly my experience of seeing other papers, when they look at stakeholders, they tend to look at very close stakeholders, either within the organization, or if you're very lucky, they may look at customers and maybe even suppliers. They seldom go beyond that in where I've worked and where I've seen people undertake this. I don't know if that's the same experience of others, but I think with circular economy, with the way that we've got more and more collaborative work with different forms of networks, that it's now changing its dynamic. It's just whether I'm alone in seeing that or whether others are experiencing it.
Well, I came from an environment where we had branded wholesale distributors and branded retailers that were connected contractually, but we worked across those boundaries on common issues. So, organization boundaries were really artificial, and we had a number of internal conversations as to what actually the brand is, because it covered so many organizations and crossed so many contracts itself, that it became rather global as representing the collective working together.
I mean, Fanny, what's your experience?
What I've seen is when people talk about stakeholders, they are, like Ross said, talking about who is affected by it. But I think we often forget those who affect the change. So, for example, if you look at a very simple IT sort of change where they're putting in a new software, they're going from doing things manually to doing things with a software system and changing the process in the process. You're going to change the way you do things. So people look at, okay, who's going to use the software within the company only? And they forget, for example, the legal department. In a very regulated area like the banking area, for example, anything you do, if you blink twice instead of once, legal is going to be on you. So people, I think when they do stakeholder analysis, they forget a lot of times those who influence the change also. And like you said, they rarely look outside the organization. How does that affect customers? How does that affect the supply chain? And I think we have ways to go there to educate people that a broader analysis is would be beneficial to the change.
I mean, from a personal point of view, for example, the European Union is spending mega millions on the circular economy because they see it as a tremendous competitive advantage, particularly in the short to mid-term future, before others catch up. And what I find is so seldom when people are looking at the stakeholders in their processes and systems, so seldom do they actually look at it in this circular state from initial design of even the containers that they're going to receive, the relationship of how do they then go to the designers to try and change that as part of their process, right through to disposal and reuse. They are all, and the whole cycle, they're all stakeholders, and yet they're seldom, if ever, even considered. And I'm working with 112 companies in Cornwall with a European project, and they now do this, and the impact and their success is exponential. And so this is why I'm challenging this traditional approach, which has this catch-all if they're affected by or affect the system, but in reality, seldom taken to that. Not so that you just blast a shotgun and hope to catch everybody, but to be more focused, but outside of the traditional view. And so that's why I raised the issue of stakeholders and why I mentioned it earlier with this government thing. I think if we look too closely, we're going to really miss the opportunities for the successful transition of the organization, which comes back to why I believe it's so important to understand business now, wherever you are in this process of change, whether you're a person who's running focus groups and brown bag lunches and all those sorts of important things, or whether you're looking at it in the bigger picture. How do any others, do they see it differently, or what's their experience?
Sorry, just for me, Reg, just
Yeah.
2 points. I mean, I work primarily in the financial sector, and clearly how we see and perceive our stakeholders will be different to how you guys work with, say, the European Union. And again, I've had the wonderful opportunity of working cross-country. I worked in Germany, France, and again, there's different interpretations and different perceptions of what your stakeholders are. So that's kind of a very, very broad question you were asking earlier, and you will always get different answers. Whichever forum you go to, you will always get different interpretations of what the stakeholder is, what they do, where they focus on, and how you're going to actually sit and drive that. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, for example, in the banking industry, whilst we've still got a cash society, although there's a lot of pressure,
only just.
particularly in the UK, whereas in Austria we don't have plastic in many of our shops because it's too expensive. Yeah, it's much too expensive for the shopkeepers. Banking is the most expensive in Europe is in Austria. But if you start to look at the stakeholders in banking, then we start looking at the people who print the money, the design of the money, so that we're not, and the UK is leading in this, I think, with their plastic money or their equivalent of plastic money, so that the reuse, the use is longer, and you can also reuse the materials. And so in the banking sector, you've got many, many opportunities in the circular economy. When you're looking at the credit cards, these plastic credit cards, which are, what do? You cut them up and they become waste. And so there are opportunities here. And this is what I mean about looking at stakeholders in a slightly different way.
each and every one of us will be different and have a different perspective on this. Interesting to see that you're absolutely correct. I think the UK is one of the leaders globally in plastic. We are beaten by Singapore, but again, equally correct. Perceptions now, particularly with this COVID, how that's changed perceptions and how they're going away from money. And everybody's now going on this pingit that we have in the UK. I'm sure you have it everywhere else. To coin a phrase, it was told to me yesterday, they think that cash is going to be dead in the next 5 years. How true and how realistic that is. Interesting. How they're going to deal with it. Many stakeholders have different ideas, and that's where it comes back to your idea. Well, again, what is your interpretation of the stakeholders, and will they ever align? Will they ever agree? Will they ever be consistent? And talking to the German stakeholders that I'm dealing with, interesting enough, don't agree. So yeah, interesting times.
Yeah, and so this is really what I'm trying to say is when we start to look at stakeholders, if we push that circle out a bit further, like the plastic thing, whereas 5 years ago we wouldn't have even thought of that. We would have just said to the IT company, go and design something for us. And the IT company now also has to understand the circular economy and the bank and the stakeholders in different ways. And this is why I raise the subject is, what do we really mean now in terms of stakeholders? Is it like we used to do, or is it something different? I mean, any others? What do they view?
I apologize. I had a power outage here, so I just got back on the call, but
Welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to get the chance to come. It was a surprise. I said, what happened actually? It took me a minute to figure out whose problem it was, but anyway, stakeholders, in my experience, are always based on outcome, a specific outcome that you're trying to achieve. Literally, no one else needs to be involved, usually, or they're not involved in the same way, and you are analyzing the stakeholder relationships, but it's based on we're creating this result, or we want to achieve this goal, or we want to focus our attention on transforming in this way. And then anyone that's affected by that, and that's where that's how I analyze my stakeholder communities is, who's actually going to take action here, who is going to be affected directly by it, who will make specific decisions about how things happen, and then who just needs to be informed when it's completed. Those kind of things are, kind of the way you sort it all out. But it really is based on what are we trying to accomplish here? And, how do we need to engage?
I agree that that's the traditional approach, and that's what I was challenging just now, unfortunately, because of your power outage, to say that if you actually look beyond that, your outcome may actually be better than what you thought you could achieve in the first place. Whether it's the resources you're using, the whatever, it can be very, very different. And so coming back to the discussion of change management or consultant, I think the change management person would do it the traditional way more likely, and the consultant may be looking in the bigger picture. And so my suggestion is you need to bring the two together.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think what I understand you to say is it's really based on the filter that you view it from.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a lot of different approaches, especially with certification processes in place, because they teach different methodologies, obviously. If you're going to pass the test, you have to know how to pass that test. So you're going to have a lot of different views and filters that come into a situation. And it's interesting to me to listen to these conversations because I cannot see these things separately. I really struggle with that kind of separate understanding of you're doing this one thing or you're hiring a person who only understands this little piece of this larger picture. I've never I've been in a lot of situations where they tried to separate it like that, but they didn't always succeed, or they, their time frame and goals had to get stretched out because they had to recover from that view. and kind
But Arlene, doesn't this come back to your experience again, as we said earlier? You started the world as as a management consultant, and you developed into other things. Yeah, you weren't segmented, and you're not segmented now. You understand the holistic, and therefore you can bring in these different views.
Yeah.
Whereas the separation, it's very hard to.
True, and that's what I'm saying I think is wrong with it, because I think people really should be holistic to really understand where these tools can be most effectively applied. And I don't think it's ever taught that way. I really think it's based on an individual solution that, got to be published, really.
Yeah, I agree.
But if we were to change the world, my goal would be to make sure everybody could be a total practitioner and just walk into a situation and kind of act like a doctor. Like, okay, what happens when you do that? Does that hurt?
Absolutely.
Really, do you need to do that all the time, or is it only, we got to figure out exactly when you're doing that, because it hurts.
Yeah, we're all given the same sheet, I guess. Yeah. Ross, over to you.
Anything else for today, or should we wrap it up? Okay. Everybody have a good week then. We'll be posting some more information on Gary's presentation next week. If anything else comes up, go ahead and post it on the discussion boards, and look forward to more conversations going forward.
Thanks, guys.
Go ahead, Reg.
Just thank you, Fanny. It's a tough job when you get this group, I tell you. And you did well.
Guys, thank you for participating. Thank you for bearing with me. I love the discussions. I think we touched on many interesting points here, and we're learning from each other and sharing.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
We'll change the world soon. Don't worry.
Keep the money rolling. Cheers, folks.
Okay, guys. Bye.